great to hear how many of you knew all those answers to the trivia questions. I thank you, Carol, and thank you, Amherst Cinema, and for the science on screen and also for all of the great programming. So again, I'm going to give a quick set of prepared remarks now. We can have an open-ended interactive discussion afterwards. So Blade Runner. One of the reasons I'm really happy to share this with you is because I think it raises a number of really exciting scientific and philosophical questions that emerge from the film's story and also from the world in which the story takes place. That world is this world. It is Earth. It's projected a bit into the future. It's actually only 4 years into the future from now. It was 37 years in the future when the first version of the film came out in theaters. It was 50 years in the future about when Philip K. Dick's novel came out, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, that inspired the film. In spite of that, I would say that this film holds up extremely well as we approach the time frame of the story. It is very far off in some ways. There are flying cars. Computer interfaces look like they did in the 80s. But on the scientific and philosophical issues, I actually think it's right on the mark. So the film asks, in certain ways, what does it mean to be a human? And it asks that by putting us in a world with artificial humans, and to some extent by giving us the perspective of what it might feel like to be an artificial human. We witness their existential crises, along with their practical and physical challenges as they grapple with their own mortality. Now, one of the things that has helped Blade Runner to stand the test of the time is that it doesn't oversimplify the distinction between the natural and the artificial. It's actually extremely subtle, especially for a sci-fi thriller, and it leaves a couple of key questions completely open. In fact, the film's ambiguity is so pronounced that different versions of the film, the original release in 1982, the TV version in 86, the so-called director's cut in 92, and the 2007 final cut, which we'll be seeing this evening, actually imply different things about the humanity of some of the central characters. Now, the situation is even more complex in Philip K. Dick's book, which I recommend that people read. It's quite amazing. That book also includes damaged humans who are treated as subhuman, along with a godlike figure who is at the center of the world's primary religion, who might be human, but it's not at all clear. Maybe he's a robot, or biologically engineered, or an alien. And the human characters, or at least the characters you believe for most of the time are human, they also treat themselves as mechanical systems, and they control themselves with these electronic systems called mood organs. So the world of Blade Runner, in this world, the lines between human and non-human, biological and mechanical, are blurry, and this invites us to ask fundamental questions about what lines are real and what lines aren't. Now, I've sometimes showed Blade Runner to the students in a class that I teach at Hampshire College called Cognitive Science Fiction. The course covers topics in cognitive science, including artificial intelligence, introducing the topics with science fiction, and then investigating them more thoroughly with readings from the scientific and philosophical literature. One of the questions that we ask after watching Blade Runner is the question of whether there really will be artificial people of the sort that the film projects. And mostly, the answer seems to be yes. First, there's a sense in which we are all already artificial people. Every organism is made by its parents and its community and its culture. Humans are made by humans. Now, many of you will want to object right there and say, that's different. Although we make humans, we basically have no idea what we're doing when we do it. And we don't design them. And I would say that's true enough. That's a different sense. And I'm going to come back in a moment to a more external sense of making.
It's okay.
But first, I do want to point out that even when it comes to biological reproduction, we humans have long been intervening in the process quite consciously and increasingly technologically. From mate selection to family planning to new reproductive technologies and probably soon genetic engineering, we manipulate the reproductive process and the future of our species. We also use technologies to extend ourselves, and these become essential components of the species that we have become and will become. These technologies range from spoken language and writing and culture to eyeglasses, pacemakers, knee replacements, intelligent hearing aids, cochlear implants, smartphones, and Google Glass. All of this further blurs the distinctions between natural and artificial, biological and mechanical. But let's go back to the question of whether there will be artificial people that are built by us, like we now build industrial robots. Mostly here the answer seems to be yes also, at least eventually, and maybe soon. It seems like we will soon have technologies that match or exceed human capabilities in all areas, physical and mental. Now, for quite a while, it has been thought that we wouldn't be able to build such things until we thoroughly understood how they're implemented in humans, so that we wouldn't be able, for example, to build systems that think strategically or creatively until we understood how humans do those things. But now, it seems like it will be good enough just to understand how learning and evolution work. If we can build a system that learns and evolves, then it may come to have capabilities that we wouldn't have a clue how to build from scratch and directly. So machine learning, that's the science of building computer systems that learn from experience, has recently been taking great strides, and you've all benefited from this, probably several times a day, every day for the last many years, even if you had no idea that machine learning was involved. If you've searched the web, you've benefited from machine learning. If you've used speech recognition, or saved time by not wading through email spam, or watched a movie recommended by Netflix, or used most of the online dating sites, or even just used a credit card, then you've benefited from machine learning. Many areas of science and engineering, ranging from genomics to climate science, are using machine learning, and some are making breakthroughs that wouldn't be possible without it. Most machine learning systems work primarily by collecting a lot of data and recognizing regularities in it. This allows them to make predictions and to improve their predictions over time. Machine learning is a really powerful tool, and it's making our technology smarter and more helpful. But we were talking here about artificial people, right? Being able to learn and to make good predictions is handy, but surely there's a lot more to being a person than that. Yes, and that's where evolution comes in. So imagine for a moment that we build a robot in roughly human form that isn't very human-like in some ways, but it can perform basic tasks like walking and following instructions, and crucially, using a screwdriver and a soldering iron. We'll also build in some basic. If the robot ever over-tightens a screw and strips its threads, it'll use less force the next time it tightens a similar screw. It can use machine learning to notice patterns and to change its actions based on those patterns if it predicts that a different action will produce a better outcome. Now, let's give the robot a list of parts, some money, and instructions for building a copy of itself, which critically will include a copy of the instructions, and send it off in the direction of an electronics supply store. It will buy the parts and build a bunch of copies, but they won't be exact copies. The instructions will include choice points for which it will toss a coin or roll some dice, and also sometimes the robot will just make mistakes. But if we build and program our robot reasonably well, then it will make many new robots, and at least some of them will set off on their own to buy more parts and build more robots. Each robot will behave a little differently. Some will be faster and some slower. Some will be more or less likely to get hit by a car when running back and forth between the parts store and the workshop. Some may figure out time-saving construction shortcuts. Some may figure out how to perform tricks for money in the park along the way to the parts store, earning money to buy more parts. Some may figure out how to salvage parts from broken down cars or discarded cell phones. Now, key thing, the more successful robots will pass their own variants of the robot-making instructions to more new robots. And eventually, there will be very clever and resourceful and creative robots living among us. Now, if we were able to do this, and if we actually did do this, what do you think will be going on in the heads and in the minds of these robots? They would apparently be thinking, and they would certainly be acting in complex ways that we, as the original designers and programmers of the first robot, may not know or even be able to understand. They may well appear to have minds of their own, and it would take a strong argument, one that philosophers have been hard-pressed to develop, to convince some observers that these robots do not actually have minds of their own. Now, ideas about self-reproducing machines go back couple hundred years, actually. And around the middle of the 20th century, they got a lot more attention. And with the development of 21st century computer technology and 3D printing, they've begun to develop more quickly. Several research groups around the world are actively working on these ideas, and they're getting published in top journals. There's a lot of progress. In my own work, I've been focusing on the evolutionary part of this story, mostly with virtual rather than physical robots. And along with using evolution to produce virtual robots, I and many others have been using evolution in computers to solve practical scientific and engineering problems, evolving mathematical formulae, designs for antennas and wind farms, and useful computer programs. There's a whole field dedicated to this kind of work. It's called evolutionary computation. And there's also an annual prize called the HUMIES for so-called human competitive results of evolutionary computation. The idea is to reward work in which computational evolution beats humans at their own game, for example, by inventing something that earns a patent, which has been done. Now, we in the field are generally very pleased when our systems are human competitive. But in the context of Blade Runner, we should pause. And we should notice that we're creating systems that actually do compete with us. And already they sometimes win. Because of the recent advances in machine learning and evolution, it no longer seems far-fetched to many of us in the field that we will soon build systems that cross a threshold of self-improvement and outstrip humans in every conceivable way. We might say, using the motto of the replicant manufacturer in the film, that these systems will be more human than human. Several prominent figures, including Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates, have recently been warning that the consequences of these developments may be dire for humanity as we know it. They may be. Much is still unknown about how the technologies will develop and about how the various intelligences in a post-AI world will interact with one another. But this is a set of issues that we cannot afford to ignore. These technologies may, it's important to remember, help us to cure diseases, invent clean energy sources, and solve some of the other critical problems that we face. In fact, they may be the only technologies that will allow us to solve some of those problems. But they may also eat us for lunch. So as you watch the film this evening, you may also want to think about the line, or the lack of a line, between natural and artificial, and about the ways in which complex systems, whether natural or artificial, if there is a difference, grow and learn and evolve. I'll be here after the show to answer questions and have a back and forth discussion.